For the next 7 days, I'm gonna be living like a Stoic. No phone, no luxury, no excuses. To show you what happens when modern life meets ancient philosophy.
But first, you might be wondering, what's Stoicism? Stoicism is a school of Greek thought that was founded in Athens around 300 BC. It was first founded by Zeno of Citium, and it was later developed by philosophers like Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus. The core principle of Stoicism can be summarized as virtue being the highest good. Stoics taught that the only true good or morally right thing is virtue. This virtue can be categorized in 4 general ways: wisdom, justice, courage, and self-control. Things like wealth, possession, health, or reputation were indifference. They were things that Stoics didn't really aim for, didn't really desire, but also wouldn't refuse if offered. Along with virtue being the highest good, Stoics taught that we should only try to control that which we can control. They also taught that we should live according to nature and reason, as well as the idea that emotions are judgments, even though we might not feel that way sometimes.
With a little help from Google, Marcus Aurelius, and ChatGPT, I sat down to build the perfect strategy for approaching life as a Stoic for 7 days.
And after making a few minor adjustments to the outline from ChatGPT, I have finally put together what I call the 7-Day Stoicism Challenge. The challenge looks a little bit something like this. Every day is going to start out with a morning routine, and then there's a midday routine, and then there's an evening routine. In the mornings, there'll be a journal and concentration. So there'll be an idea or there'll be a theme for each of the 7 days. There will also be a question that I'll answer and reflect on in the morning. In the midday, I'll reflect and meditate on the question once again. In the evening, I'll have more journaling and more reflection as I consider the question and how I approach the theme throughout the day. I've also interjected some time for prayer here in my schedule, because prayer is a really big part of my life, it's a big part of my day, and so I felt like putting prayer into the schedule was a perfect thing to do. And like any good Stoic, I'm going to be ensuring that I put myself in daily discomforts. Every morning, I'm going to randomly select a new discomfort here from the daily discomfort charts. Every day, I will be adding a new discomfort to my routine. Some of these are only daily discomforts, so they're only for a day, but some of these I have to do for the entire week. The third and final component will be principles that I will be applying throughout my life throughout the entire week. This includes things like speak only when necessary, no complaining or gossiping, don't interrupt others, let them finish talking, and spend more time outside.
As I prepared my morning coffee, I was very confident about the week. I thought, well, Stoicism is mostly just concepts and philosophies that you put into practice in your life, which can seem challenging to some, but in the grand scheme of YouTube challenge videos, I felt like it was a pretty simple concept. Still, I wasn't really sure what to expect because I wasn't sure what discomforts I'd be faced with every morning, and I wasn't really sure how the reflection time and themes for the day would play out in my life. Since being outside more is one of the principles that I'll be following for the entire week, I decided to go for an early morning walk, which, Stoic or not, is a really great way to start the day. And after arriving at the office, I was ready to start with the first journal and concentration of the week.
It's time to make our first pick from the board of daily discomforts. So I'm going to pick something, I'm going to pick one at random. I know what these are, but I don't know, they're all mixed up. They're all in a different order, so I don't know which one I'm going to pick. I think I'm going to go with 3. 3 is speaking my name. Okay. I can get it off. TV. No YouTube or other streaming services. So this is a discomfort that is going to be a week-long discomfort. A little daunting, but I think we're going to do it. So no YouTube or other streaming services, which essentially means I cannot turn on the TV at home for an entire week. So with that out of the way, we're going to dive into our daily journal entry for the morning.
The first question of the day was write down 3 things you can control and 3 things you cannot. I think what interested me most about this question is how simple it was, but how effective it was to actually think through it. When I'm asked the question of what are things that you can control, I have very obvious answers, like I can control the things that I say or the things that I eat, like anyone really can. But when I think about the question, it helps me to think of other things on sort of the periphery that I wouldn't have thought of otherwise without actually meditating on the question itself. So I actually found this to be a really helpful exercise. I figured I'd spend my prayer and meditation time outside because, as I said earlier, being outside more is one of the sort of overall themes and principles that I'm applying to the week. This time of prayer and meditation was just as relaxing as the walk that I took in the morning. It felt nice to be outside, to be present, and to feel somewhat grounded.
So we're at the end of day 1, even though it's actually 4 in the morning the next day, but I figured I could do this now since I wasn't able to get to it last night between getting home and feeding the baby and everything. But I did do my midday meditation and prayer, which was a really nice just pause in the middle of the day to continue to reflect on what the theme of the day was. And the reflection question for tonight is, in what ways did you waste energy trying to control things that you couldn't? And I thought that was a really interesting question because I'd never really considered that it wastes energy and it wastes time to try and control things that you can't control and to not give those up. So I'd say I did a pretty decent job of the principles throughout the day. There were actually a couple of moments. There was a moment where I was talking to my mom where I applied the principle of listening before speaking and only speaking when necessary. And then my wife and I were having a conversation when I got back from work, and I applied the principles of listening and not speaking until it's necessary. And the conversation went very healthy. I mean, it was a very healthy conversation. As a result, I was able to let her say everything that she needed to say without feeling like she was being interrupted, which I think is a very common thing in our culture. Like, I would say one of the things that I learned from the exercise for day 1 is it can be very hard to let people finish speaking and to wait to speak when necessary, and to only accept control over things that you can truly control. Because when someone's talking, our knee-jerk reaction is, well, we just want a response. Like we need to respond to this thing that they said, or to say something about this thing that they said. And a lot of times the reason why we have that drive to just respond that way, it's because we aren't recognizing those things which are out of our control and those things which are in our control. And the thing that's out of control is what they say to us. But the thing that's in our control is when and how we respond to them. And I think that in that way, those principles are connected to each other. Another thing that makes it difficult is people can often talk and talk and talk a lot. And so when you're listening to someone talk and you're abiding by the principle, let them finish speaking before you speak, sometimes you have responses in your head, but they're talking for so long that you forget what you were going to respond with in the first place, which does a couple of things. And the first thing it does is it kind of reminds me that maybe not everything that we have to respond with is important anyway. Like, if we forget it so easily, is it really that important of a response? And secondly, it reminds me that the way that our culture consumes media is having the type of effect on us that we can't be engaged in stimulating conversations long enough to remember what it is that we're going to say. I think that the phenomenon of forgetting what we're going to say in response to something because someone talked for 5 minutes, I think is a phenomenon that is related to our obsessive social media consumption that I've become so used to and inundated with short form content that when we're speaking to someone, our brain is only able to process that same form or that same length of content. And so it becomes difficult for us to be able to stay engaged in a much longer format of conversation. And so it forgets the things that it was going to say throughout that conversation. So those are some of the things I would say I've learned from day one. The TV did stay off, and it will stay off today and the rest of the day. And I would say, honestly, a more eye-opening and thoughtful and reflective day than I honestly anticipated. So I'm looking forward to day number 2, and we're going to jump right into it. Time for day 2 of daily discomforts. So today I'm feeling lucky number 6. So I'm going to see what number 6 is. Number 6 is skip a meal. So this is a discomfort that is going to be for the rest of the week. So for the next 6 days, I have to skip a meal, which will most likely be lunch, possibly dinner, maybe breakfast. I actually don't know, but that's our discomfort for the rest of the week.
So the theme for today is practicing wisdom. Think, I will not be ruled by impulse. Write one decision you expect today, plan how to approach it wisely.
As I contemplate today's meditation, I'm reminded of James chapter 1, verse 5. It says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God who gives graciously. And I'm reminded of the book of Proverbs, the fact that there is an entire book in the Bible that's full of wisdom. And I don't think it's a mistake that there is an entire book dedicated to wisdom. And it's not just Proverbs. There's wisdom in Ecclesiastes, there's wisdom in Psalms. But I wonder if the reason why is because wisdom is so much more valuable than we tend to think that it is or tend to give credit to it. As we get older, we just tend to get wiser in the sense that we've lived more life and we know more things or have had more experiences that have shaped us in specific ways. And I wonder if the reason why there's so much focus on wisdom in 3 whole books of the Bible is because we get so caught up in the moment that we're living in that we forget how short life really is.
I was thinking about the idea of wisdom, and I sort of realized something, or I thought of something. It's that we need knowledge to know how to live. So I need knowledge in order to know how to drive my car, in order to know how to work my job, how to buy and care for a house or an apartment. And you need knowledge to know how to live. But I wonder if wisdom is what you need to know how to live a life.
Good morning. Once again, it is very early, 4 a.m. in the morning the next day. I'm finding that it's the easiest time to actually do the night reflection and journaling at the end of the day from the previous day. It's just the way that my schedule works out the best. So yesterday's journal and reflection for the evening, for the end of the day, was, did I act wisely or did I act by impulse? And I think that's an interesting question because I never really considered impulse being the opposite reaction from wisdom. Acting on impulse in biblical terms would be acting on the flesh, acting on your desires and wants rather than on what the wise thing is to do, I think impulse is the enemy of Stoicism, because if you're only speaking when it needs to be spoken, and you're slow to speak, and you're listening and let other people speak, and you're controlling only what you can control and accepting what you can't, those things are the enemy of impulse. Those things all together make impulse more difficult to enact on. I did do my midday meditation, which was good, and I skipped dinner. So I am actually quite hungry right now, so I'm gonna go make some breakfast. I'll catch you later. All right, day 3 of our daily discomfort selection. I think I'm gonna go with number 2. Number 2 is social media. No scrolling on social media for the rest of the week. The theme for today is cultivating courage. The reflection and meditation for this morning is think, I will be courageous in every situation. Identify one situation where you can act bravely today.
After spending some time reflecting on this morning's question, I wrote my thoughts down in a journal. Then I quickly followed that up with a time of prayer and reflection outside, as I've usually been doing.
So I'm just about midday of day 3, and things are still going pretty good. I think the discomforts are starting to slowly pile on each other because they're a lot to remember. So no TV at all, and then no social media, and then I have to skip a meal every day. So I have a feeling that by the time I get to day 6, the discomforts are gonna pile up quite a bit. And I know that there's some discomforts in there that I am not looking forward to. But thankfully, I haven't picked them yet. And that's not intentional. It is truly at random. I've just gotten really lucky that I haven't picked the ones that I really don't want yet. But it's going well. Day 3's going great. I reflected on courage in the midday meditation and concentration. Reflected on courage this morning, obviously, during the journaling time.
Day 4 was pretty much identical to day 3, except the daily discomfort for this day is no music. Spend the day in silence, which is the first only one day discomfort that I picked, so it's a good change up. The theme for today is practicing justice. Think, how can I serve others today? Identify one situation where you can act or be selfless today. As I spent my time in reflection, I considered how my actions might reflect selflessness rather than selfishness on a regular basis. A reflection that I hadn't done quite often, but I realized was an important reflection, whether it be on a weekly or monthly basis, just to evaluate your attitude and heart towards others.
We are at the end of day 4, and I was just reflecting a little bit on the question for tonight. And the reflection question for tonight is, would the world be better off if everyone was like you? That's such an interesting question because we often feel that way. I wouldn't be surprised if everyone at some point or another had that same thought. That the world would just be a better place if everyone believed what I believed, they did what I did, they acted like I acted. But to stop and think about that, I'm not really so sure it would be a better place. I mean, sure, there would be a lot of me to agree with, but that doesn't mean I would agree with me. And there would only be so much diversity. It would be very minimal. I mean, the beautiful thing about the world is how diverse it is. The fact that there's just so many different styles of art, so many different types of ways of cooking food, so many different cultures, so much different kinds of music. Yes, that diversity is also what makes the world so incredibly difficult to have peace in. Like, think about our culture, American culture. The fact that we are the most non-homogeneous, the most diverse culture is a beautiful thing, but it's also a really difficult thing. Because with different cultures, with different perspectives, with different worldviews, comes different philosophies about how the world should be run, about the way that people should behave and what people should do, what's right or what's wrong, what's normal and what isn't normal. And when you have groups of people, pockets of people, who are so convinced that their way of seeing the world
is the only way that people should be seeing the world. It naturally creates conflict. So I think the question is then, which one has more value? Is it more valuable to live in a world where there isn't that social conflict because of the diversity of worldview? Or is it more valuable to live in a world where there is? And I don't know if I could answer that question right now in my car, but it's certainly something to think about.
Days 5 and 6 had a flow that was similar to days 1 through 4. The theme for day 5 was self-discipline. The morning reflection was, how can you overcome your desires? The evening reflection was, does restraint bring freedom or frustration? Having been following daily discomforts for the week, I can certainly say that restraint brings frustration at the beginning and in the moment, but in the long term, it brings freedom. The daily discomfort for day 5 was nausea. If you know me, you know that I love drinking my sugar-free, caffeine-free cola. This was a hard one to surrender, not gonna lie. Day 6 was pretty much the same. My daily discomfort for day 6 was drink only water for a day. I'd like to say I succeeded, but some friends came over and bought us lunch, and this discomfort ended pretty quickly, unfortunately. The theme for the day was contentment. How can contentment change the way you see your daily life? Considering I did a whole video on contentment linked in the description, I already had an answer prepared for this one. As day 7 rolled around, I found it hard to believe that it had already been 7 days. This has somewhat to do with the challenge, but more so to do with just life itself and how quickly time goes by with each passing moment. The discomfort for day 7 was take only cold showers. I was very thankful that this was the last discomfort, since it would be pretty difficult and discomforting to take cold showers for 7 days in a row. The theme for the day is gratitude. And the question or concentration for the morning is, if this were my last day, how would I live? As I wrote down my thoughts to the question, I considered how the entire week has affected me.
So we're at the end of day 7, and I've kind of taken the day to reflect and ponder on this past week. And one of the things that I'll say right off the bat is I do feel that a Stoicism challenge is an incredibly good thing for everyone to at least do at once in their life. That said, I think it needs to be longer than a week. I mean, I've been doing this for a week, and as I'm at the end, I genuinely feel that you could be on the verge of a major life change if only it was just a bit longer. What I'm trying to say is I could really feel the thoughts and ideas and the mentality behind Stoicism quietly transforming the way that I thought about everyday interactions in everyday life. And if there was one thing that I would say was probably the most influential over this past week, I would actually say it was the guiding principles. So if you remember, the guiding principles were the 4 principles that I abided by, or I tried to follow throughout the entire week. It was speak only when necessary, no complaining or gossiping, don't interrupt others, let them finish talking, and spend more time outside. Honestly, I would say that these 4 principles actually had some of the greatest effect on my life throughout the week. Not that the journal and the meditation didn't, they certainly did, but I found myself constantly reflecting on those principles throughout the week when I was in different situations. Situations where I was talking to my wife, or I was talking to a friend or another family member, and I would be constantly reflecting on those, thinking, only speak, don't say something unless it's important that I say it. And when I was in that mentality, it would honestly show to me the things that I had intended to say, and it would show me how unimportant or often not useful things that I would say. Obviously, I wasn't perfect at it, and neither was Marcus Aurelius, but the principles themselves helped me to reflect on the way that I interacted with other people. Another thing that it did is it got me to think about the way that I reacted to certain situations. I would be in a situation where I would be tired, stressed, and I'd think to myself, no complaining. Don't complain. For me, that principle helped me not to just not complain, but it helped me to evaluate how I wanted to respond. And it helped me to think about how I should respond. What I should do, what I should say. Because it didn't matter how I felt most of the time. Because a lot of times I felt frustrated or I'd feel stressed. But I'd think to myself, no complaining, let it go, walk away, and let's think about how you should respond to this. So I would say that those 4 principles actually had a really good tangible impact on my life. Now, when it came to the discomforts, there was social media, no scrolling on social media. I was able to do that one fairly well, honestly, but there were some nights where I was on social media just because I was making posts for the YouTube channel, because I don't just post on YouTube, I post on all my other socials. I'm on TikTok, I'm on Twitter or X, I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. And so I post on those channels. No food, drink water for a day. You remember me talking about that one and saying that unfortunately it didn't work very well, because we had some really good friends of ours. They came over on that day, and they bought lunch for us, and so I did end up eating on that day. And then the next one is Zevia, no drinking Zevia, and that one I did follow for the day. I can't remember if I said that was supposed to be for the rest of the week or if it was just for a day, but I did follow it for a day, and boy was that hard. If you know me, you know that I love my Zevia, and it's really hard. And you also know that I don't like the taste of water, but it was a difficult one for me to follow for the day. Shower, that's for today, so that's day 7. Only take cold showers, so that's going to be a nice feeling when I get home tonight and take a shower before bed. No music, so that one, interestingly enough, this one, no music, wasn't really that difficult for me, because I don't listen to tons of music anyway, but the music that I do listen to is very much background noise, ambient, atmospheric type of music, the kind of music you could put on and it doesn't really distract you from what you're doing. Think Skyrim background music. That's kind of what it's like. And so this one actually really wasn't that difficult. TV, that was sort of difficult, but I barely even noticed that the TV hadn't even been turned on. I didn't even think about it until yesterday, to be totally honest. And then food, that was another very, very difficult one, depending on the day. Some days were a lot easier, where I would just kind of skip lunch and just work through lunch during the day and then get home and have a nice meal and have a nice dinner with my wife. But skipping a meal was a little difficult. I would say that on the one day, which was 2 days ago, I wasn't able to skip a meal because we had those friends over. But for the most part, I followed the discomforts. And when it comes to discomforts, I would say that you need to give them more time. A week is plenty of time to feel discomfort, for sure. The reason for the discomfort is because eventually it leads to comfort. Eventually it leads to sort of a revelation about your life in which you make that change permanently or semi-permanently in a different way. And I think something like that takes a lot more time than just a week. I would say it probably takes a month. Overall, I would say that the challenge was worth it. Overall, I'd say I would not mind doing something like it again. In fact, if you want to see me do a month's worth of Stoic challenge, let me know in the comments. If this video gets 1,000 likes, then I'll do it. If you want to do a Stoic challenge, I will leave a link in the description to the printout that I used. I think one of the most important parts about it, like I had mentioned before, is just the reflection. The ability to just be present in the moment and to reflect on attitudes, thoughts, and actions that you don't normally reflect on because life is so busy. You're so busy doing things. You're so busy with responsibilities. And a lot of those responsibilities are important ones that we have to do regardless of whether or not we want to do them. But a lot of those responsibilities are responsibilities that we put on ourselves. Things that we put on our plate, regardless of how full it is. The Stoicism Challenge really helps you realize, number one, helps you realize how busy your life is, and that a lot of that busyness is just us putting things on our plate when we know that we shouldn't. It's us keeping ourselves distracted. Distracted from what? I don't know. I think it's different for everyone. But Stoicism helps you to realize how much is on your plate. It helps you to realize that there's too much. And it helps you to slow down, to calm down, and to think about the way that we interact with others in our lives. And it brings peace because we learn how to respond with love. And the other thing that I'll say, this is probably one of the most important things. Stoicism has a lot of parallels to Scripture. The attitudes, the teachings, the philosophy of Stoicism. And as I'm practicing Stoicism throughout the week, I'm thinking to myself, wow, a lot of this stuff, especially it's self-discipline, talking about the tongue and the things that we say, talking about courage, talking about contentment. And whatsoever state I am content. That's what Paul says. The Bible actually has a lot to say about the very philosophies and thoughts and ideas that Stoicism encapsulates. And I would say that the Scripture brings it full circle. I would say that Scripture brings it to a point where it's not just do these things, do these virtues because they're good things, but it shows us why they're good things. The Bible shows us why they're worth doing and what makes them so good. I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that Stoicism gets you to the point of understanding and seeing and being willing to see what is good about these virtues, what is good about this mindset and this philosophy. And Scripture takes you further to understand why they're good and to understand who made them and why they're important. So thank you all for joining me. It's been a blast. I'm going to go inside and say hi to my family. But I love you all, and I hope you have an awesome night.